I like that
Job
countdown.
Seeker Gordon. Yes, don't you love it? Job Seeker Nation, thank you very much for joining us here. This is the program where we give as much job search and career advice as much as possible. Your being here really makes a difference to us. Join us in the chat. We want you to chat us up. And today we're talking about all things recruiting. We're going to get to it here in a second. As you see, there's a gentleman here that is not normally here. His name is Ed Hahn. He's our guest today. We want to know
Hey,
what's on the mind of recruiters. Of course, Ed is one of those guys that's also a writer. He calls himself a wordsmith and is pretty dangerous with the pen, if we could say so. Here, he's also a contributor, at least in the past, to about.com, and I guess now is Balanced Careers and also job-hunt.org, and other places as well. So those are the biggest places where I've been as well. So thank you. And of course, in the middle is Jack Kelly. He is the founder of Recruiter.io, Forbes Senior Career Contributor, and also my co-host that joins me every week in doing this. So as we're co-hosting together, we're going to really grill Ed and find out what the well, not really. It's going to be our usual discussion. Our
Way to
usual
make him feel
discussion.
comfortable, right?
Right, absolutely. And we'll tend to have a little bit of fun in doing this. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to entertain your questions as we go on as we have our discussion. And of course, if you dare to say hi to us in the chat, tell us where you're from, get involved, ask questions, talk to each other, chat it up as we begin. So we're talking about all things recruiters. Of course, both of them have been long time experienced recruiters. So you got the best. I'm going to probably sit in a cut pretty much and moderate the thing. Of course, I'll just add a 2 cents here and there. But really, Ed and Jack are the seasoned guys here. And we're going to run with a couple of ideas here. One is, recruiters tend to have their own take on HR matters, especially when it comes to hiring, firing. And of course, they are going to do basically what the employers tell them to do, not particularly what the rest of us mortal men would want them to do, of course. So for you guys these days in the pandemic, taking consideration that hiring is going up, that hiring is also being complicated by different factors, whether it's salary, whether it's hiring from the front line, or whether it's, any other extenuating issues like remote working. What are the deal breakers for you guys these days? And I'm going to start with Ed because Ed has a fresher perspective than Jack. I talk to him all the time. So, but I think you'll get really good, unique perspectives here. So, Ed, for you these days, maybe we should discuss first what would make you instantly grab a candidate. What makes it for you, and what automatically catches your eye?
I mean, every recruiter is going to say somewhere at the very beginning of this response, well, obviously, I want to make sure that the skills are all there that the hiring manager is looking for, especially for a more senior position, right? Uh, or where it's relevant industry experience. Okay, so look, we know all of that. Did you check all the boxes, right? Um,
Hmm.
but let's move beyond that. Where is it that the people can really differentiate themselves, right? Because that's the really interesting. That's the really fun part. That's where the conversations get really really thrilling, right?
Hmm.
And when for me at least, when that happens, is if I can see if I see how this new position is really kind of the next the a really logical capstone to what's preceded it, right? I mean, there's usually some kind of story behind a person wanting a new job, right? It's
Hmm.
not just, oh, there's an RIF or layoff, right? Or they're furloughing or whatever. these are all stories that every recruiter's heard for the last 14 months, frankly. We
Hmm.
know these things. The ones that really make me interested, though, are when there's clearly a story, or I'll admit
Hmm.
I really feel for those folks who had to put a break on their careers because they had to become caregivers.
Right.
There's a lot of these stories going on right now, you know. So for those cases, I really do want to see what is there that we can do. How where else do I see match here and fulfillment in terms of aligning both your career skills as well as um, what your journey has been.
And
Okay, so for you, did you was it a case of when it first began where you first hear the stories and you realized that you couldn't go about business as usual, or that there was some kind of maybe a improvision to what you usually do as far as a routine in the process?
I think that on some level, for speaking for myself anyway, um, I think that there's a little bit of wow. That's when you connect with somebody, you're learning their story, and that's a powerful
Mhm.
thing. I mean, humans have been telling stories to one another ever since the days that we lived in caves. After all, right? I mean,
Right,
that's what those
right.
paintings are all about. Um, but I think that there's something very compelling about that, and something that also resonates with hiring managers when they understand what's going on there. It's not just data. I mean, look, we can talk all day long about data driven, and that's great.
Hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, it's story that sells us on things. That's why
Yeah.
commercials are always stories. They don't just
Hmm.
put up bullet points, sales figures, KPIs, or whatever the product equivalent is, right? I mean, they tell us a story.
Right. Right. Yeah. The story, and if people have learned to customize their stories and have was being thoughtful about it, then they would have a chance at being heard and being memorable. If I'm understanding all that succinctly.
so,
Exactly.
Ed, let me ask your opinion on this. So, I understand about the stories. I find from, let's say, being a recruiter on the outside,
Right.
from a search firm perspective, and feedback from candidates, oftentimes companies, they want to find that plug and play.
Right.
So you can have a
Hmm.
story that resonates. And maybe because if they're going outside to a recruiter and they're paying a fee, it's a whole different ballgame. And I get that
Sure.
because if you're paying a fee, you say, hey, we want to find someone perfect. So what
Hmm.
I've been seeing is that there's this tendency, and it's been escalating over the years, that if I'm going to represent Mark for a role, he has to have like 10 out of 10 of the
Yep.
boxes checked. And do you think that's going to change now that we're in the pandemic and it's like we shake in the box and everything is different now, and that there might be more empathy, as you're saying, like hearing
Right.
stories about what happened? Do you think that could be like this could be a turning point?
Well, it's a great question, Jack, and I'm not quite sure how to answer it because
Yeah.
really, the best analogy to what we're experiencing right now was during the Great Recession. And to be clear, I
Hmm.
was not a recruiter in those days.
Yeah.
Right? Um, like if a client comes to you, Jack, and says, "Listen, I want a 10 on 10 fit for this role, whatever it is," right? Um, and yeah, of course, your recruiting manager is going to go to the recruiters and say, "Hey, listen, we're looking for this, that, the other thing. You know how to hunt it. Go." And at some level, your rep is going to talk with contact and say, "Okay, what is you're really looking for here? I mean, we can talk. You have that intake conversation takes place." And your rep is also, of course, diving into. Okay, I know what the JD says. What are you really looking for, right?
Hmm.
Um, and what I have found consistently is that more often than not, and Jack, you've lived this for a while, so you know this better than I do. I think just because the hiring manager says they want X doesn't really mean give them X, because X is not always what they actually want. Moreover, X might be trumped by other considerations or factors. There might be other things going on in the broader context of the hiring decision and the staffing need that might have material impact on what X ultimately winds up becoming.
So when you say that, do you mean that they may start with a certain idea in mind, but then as time goes on, it may morph, it may change. They may meet somebody who brings certain talent. They go, huh, I didn't think of this. Let me recalibrate. Let me recalibrate. Oh, I didn't know that Ed brought this to the table, huh? Right. Maybe we could add that, and that's more important than some of the other stuff we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For example, and this actually happens rather a lot in my intakes when I speak with my leaders that I'm supporting and want to make sure I'm hunting the right kind of talent for them. What will oftentimes happen is they'll say, okay, I want someone who does X. And I said, okay, well, you said X. What I think I hear is you want someone who has these experiences, or rather these capabilities. Are these things routes to having those capabilities? So oh, okay, yeah, that would make sense. Well, or perhaps, because that's part of my active listening practice, they say, no, not exactly. And they'll explain and help me fine tune my understanding better, right? So I think that there's certain awareness. I think that it's actually not a bad idea for external recruiters to be able to say, okay, listen, this may not be exactly the exact kind of resume you're expecting from me, but I think there's something very interesting going on with this person, right? Like one of my trusted staffing partners sent me a candidate for a contingent need, and the candidate is all DoD work. We're not a DoD shop. We don't need clearance. And if you've worked with cleared staff, you know that once you have a clearance, you've got 2 years before you go back on a project that requires that clearance, or it's going to expire. And it's a pain to get back, And so, at no point have we really considered anyone who had a clearance, because it wasn't relevant. And most of the time, that talent wants to keep that clearance going as long as they can. So that was very much part of the conversation I had with her. I said, so, just to be clear, your last DoD project was on this date. If you take on this role, that's going to push it out beyond the 2-year mark. And she's like, oh, I don't want to be in that life. All that work requires being in a certain geography, which I don't want to be in anymore. Okay, I'm good.
Hey, Ed, can I ask you, I think with a lot of people they're always curious, like what goes on behind the scenes. For instance, they'll maybe interview and it goes really well. And then, it becomes a cliche now because it happens so often, then they get ghosted. It used to be when I first started recruiting, you get feedback, you get constructive criticism, and you share it with the candidate, which would help them. Now, it's more of you get ghosted, you don't get the feedback, but then maybe months later, you'll get an email either saying sorry or, hey, come back in like nothing happened.
Yeah. So
it just seems that there's what's lost to me from like 20 plus years ago to now is that human connection where you had that relationship. It could be from the hiring manager. Let's say you're the candidate. It would be like between, the hiring manager and you, and then Mark's the HR person, where like you really go a lot of back and forth on the phone talking. Now it doesn't. So people I think biggest concern, and I wonder if you hear this too, Ed, and Mark, I know you hear this from job seekers, they just feel like lost, like what's going on? Why am I being overlooked? So is there something like, not in your company, I'm talking general, not where you are, because where you are is awesome, you're great people, but at other places, how is, like, what's really happening?
I think, it's such an important question, Jack, and I know that this is it's the new version of the black hole, right?
Yeah.
It really is. Right? We talked about the black hole during the Great Recession and the years leading up to it, and then it metastasized, and everyone was talking about it then. But this is the newest iteration of it, really, right? There's simply nothing coming back, although there had been something at some point. And I think there's a couple of factors at play here. Number one, I think the biggest delta, has to be the fact that that culturally we're a lot more litigious than we were back in the
Yeah.
day. You know,
That's interesting. That's a really good point. Okay.
you know,
Yeah, that makes sense.
now,
And when you say,
and
I'm sorry, because I was interrupting. I presume you mean that, hey, you're scared to say something because then it could be perhaps misconstrued that you didn't, this person wasn't hired because of their race, religion, age, height, whatever it may be. So it's easier not to say anything than say anything, and it could be a lawsuit. Is that
exactly.
When you said delta? I'm embarrassed to say. When you said, is that like, what does that mean exactly? The delta, is that like
So
a big
the
Change.
difference, the change.
Okay.
the change? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think that's the biggest factor, by far, right? But there's also, on some level, I think, a certain element that goes with.
And I don't do you think then that's a double whammy? That, let's say, there's a person in a certain minority group, and they won't say anything because they're, if you say litigation, but they don't say anything, then that makes it worse for that other person because they're thinking like, what the heck just happened? And do they actually feel like they're being discriminated against because so like it compounds the problem. So let's say like they'd even think like they're going for an interview and say, all right, whatever. And then you're thinking, hey, I didn't hear back. Is that because and fill in the blank? I'm in this comp, which could actually make people feel even worse. I wonder.
I think that there's a lot of vicious circle that can happen here, right? I mean, and it's going to be fed, of course, by the absence of information. But the absence of information, as far as the employer is still concerned, is still preferable to making a statement that could have even worse ramifications, or the exact same ramifications that you're seeking to avoid in the first place. There's in sports, there's unforced errors, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And taking an action that can have a negative result is very much an unforced error. So, like from the risk mitigation standpoint, I think that's what's happening there. But even above and beyond that, though, right? I think that something else that's taking place with respect to the lack of feedback, and even when there is feedback, it's usually bland and designed to be unactionable, right?
Yeah.
For example, I'm sorry, I'm afraid that there are other candidates that we're considering that we felt are a stronger match for what the hiring manager is seeking at this time. And obviously the intention is for that to speak to skills and or culture fit, right? And that's clearly what it's meant to do. It does not obviate some of the other concerns, though. So it's not great, but it still says something at least. It acknowledges, hey, thank you very much for your interest in the opportunity with this organization. We do appreciate your interest. We're giving you the closure to let you know that we're not moving forward with you. And here's a bland, a statement that says that we're not gonna, right? But the problem is
So it's all again. What about what you said about the litigation part? Is all to avoid the litigation part by making it as generic as possible.
Right,
that's the only feedback most. That's what most recruiters and employers are going to give. It's just something generic to where you said you can't sue me.
Right. But the thing is that there's another piece to it, right? And this other piece to it, I think, is the old no good deed goes unpunished, right? One of the challenges, if you try to help someone and they're not ready to hear what you have to say, they'll fight you on it. That is unfortunately something that happens to
when you say that, you mean like, for instance, I'll say to you, hey, let's say I'm the hiring manager or what have you, and I'll say to you, hey, Ed, thank you for interviewing, but we really need someone who had 6 years of anti-money laundering and 3 of this Bank Secrecy Act. And then you're thinking, wait, Jack, I have it. And then it becomes uncomfortable. It becomes this confrontational thing because,
well,
in the spirit of trying to give some feedback, it ends up becoming a debate and it could go off the rails. Is that what you mean, kind of thing?
That's essentially what I'm getting at. Yes.
Yeah.
Because The way I like to characterize it is this is a conversation. This is not a debate. This is not a negotiation, you know? And when you offer that feedback, when you're saying this is the decision that has been made, I'm communicating it to you. Unfortunately, this is not always understood as being a non-negotiation situation. So people want to go litigate it anyway. And I understand that people want to do that, but frankly, if I can avoid it, I would very much like to,
Yeah.
because if we wind up going down that road conversationally, right, that necessarily pits us one against the other. I'd rather not do that. I want this. I want my conversations not to be conflict. I want them to be much more about consensus. So to the extent that I'm able to avoid the conflict and achieve consensus, at least, um, and leave with a positive final note with the candidate on the candidate's mind, um, that's much more successful because you know what? This is not necessarily the only time I'm going to talk with this person ever, even at this employer. I mean, heck, there was one guy that applied for a position with us in like, I want to say December, November, something like that. I spoke with him briefly. He was not really a match for the position at hand, but he just has some really interesting experience, so I wanted to talk with him. Well, son of a gun, turned out to be a great candidate for the rec that showed up like 6 weeks later. And because we'd already spoken, because we'd established a little bit of rapport, that conversation was very easy.
Yeah, I'd be interested in if people who are watching in the chat tell me what your experience has been, especially when there's times when you've been turned down. I'd like to hear what your experience has been, what kind of language was used, and was it as generic as it described? That would be a very interesting way to get a crowdsource going right here, because I think people, for the most part, have experienced a generic language, but I think too they also watch and they look to see, especially in the LinkedIn timeline, where there's more transparency that goes on than what we think that doesn't go on, because people will say, you know, a pattern eventually shows if people are watching the timelines and watching everybody else move about because of the way that maybe they've been turned down, where the one was ghosted and one was told. That could tell a story as well.
Sure. And yeah, that would be some very interesting intelligence.
You also get the other side of the equation, where you'll have candidates. Again, this has not necessarily your company, but just in general,
right,
where they'll send their applications and really say, "Hey, I'm perfect for it. I'm great," and they're really not. And it's this mismatch, which becomes kind of what you were talking about before, where they feel, and I can counter this, where for some jobs, if you really pull back the layers of the onion, they can do it. Even if they haven't done it, it's not brain surgery kind of roles. And these could be mid to senior level, but if they're smart and motivated and have 3 out of the 10 ingredients, and they have the interpersonal social, they can. So the person, sometimes they're not wrong in that when they say I could do it, but on the other side of the fence, they're saying nope, because you don't have 10 out of 10 or 11 out of 10 or 12 out of 10, what have you. Nope, sorry, you can't go. And it just becomes this very uncomfortable, awkward.
Right. And you're right, of course, Jack. Listen, but the perennial tension in all of staffing, whether we're talking contingent external or internal, right? The inherent tension has always been, I want someone who can do the job, but do it at a very high level. Now, whether or not the compensation on offer allows you to attract, and retain the talent that can perform the job at a very high level, right? That's another matter entirely. But that's always been the tension. And so the thing is, the competition sometimes can be ferocious. It has been pretty fierce for the last 14 months, although slightly less so nowadays, based on the conversations I'm having with a number of people. Um, but yeah, the because you can do the job, that's great. But someone else might be much better qualified to do the job, and that's a job. That's a decision that a hiring manager can defend to their boss and their boss's
Mhm.
boss.
Are you seeing it now
Uh,
that there's more jobs than people available for the roles that you're handling?
I'm in that very same situation with a couple of the recs I'm currently working
Yeah.
right now, like literally this moment.
Now, what happens? Like, and you don't have to, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable at your own company, because what I see sometimes is that it becomes this weird dynamic. And Mark and I have talked about this in prior, podcasts. Is that so? You'll have the company; they have their salary band and bonus
Right.
structure, and candidates have their money in mind, and the job seeker, understandably, after a year plus in a pandemic, they realize this world is not safe. My job is not safe. 80 million Americans have to file for unemployment. Look what happened, was going on in India. There could be another strain. So if I'm a crew, I want to work remote, and let's make up a number. I'm making 100. I want 130 or 40, because what happens if I go there and something goes wrong? Not through my taking, but just COVID or what have you, and I'm out of work. And then you have the companies. I'm completely generalizing. You have the companies that are saying, okay, here's what we said we're going to pay, and that's it. Instead of readjusting, like you were talking about earlier, instead of readjusting, say, I get what's on the mind of these job seekers, and the concern and the fear. Let's raise, the salaries, but that's not really happening in the
Right.
white collar space. It's starting to happen in actually the lower wage workers, the blue collar.
Yep.
But I'm not seeing it. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing companies start to kind of, the light bulb goes on and says, oh, we gotta really cough up more money, or that's not happening yet?
I can only speak to what I've experienced.
Yeah.
So having said that, I don't believe that I'm seeing a move towards that right now. Nor do I recall hearing a lot of it in the last couple of months.
Mhm.
I mean, Jack, you and I frequent some of the same groups, so if you're hearing it, then I've missed those conversations. Um, so I can't say that I've seen it, at least certainly for the stuff that I'm working on, but I do see a number of stories where that is happening in like the retail space, for
Yeah.
example, right?
See, that's
Or,
right. That's where there's a lot of conversation about, like,
yeah,
hey, you have, we'll say, hey, we can't hire, and they say, well, let's pay a living wage, and then you can get it, and you have that, dialogue going back and forth, but not as much of the white collar, professionals.
yeah. I don't think I'm seeing it. Not in that space. No.
Yeah, well, the danger for me in seeing that, because retail is seasonal, so you can almost treat this summer like Christmas,
Right.
and maybe parts of the fall like the downtime after Christmas, but it will be Christmas. So this brings up a very interesting dynamic, that the salary may be great as an offer, but the equalizer is, oh, well, instead of working 40 hours, you'll have to work 20 hours now, at least until Christmas. That's where it becomes a little bit more interesting than it has in the past, because we know that the big season is going to come up again at Christmas, but then it's going to keep going up and down. And what's going to actually sustain a business, and what's going to actually be sustainable for an employee who is depending on the livable wage. But then when the hours go away, so does the livable wage. So it's a lot different than a white collar job or office job, where there is a constant, there might be downtime, and there might be certain jobs that might say, well, you'll have to take a day off during the week for us to even out the books. But with like retail and some of the other business like travel and so forth, it's a little bit different dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough space to work. But that's also where a lot, as Jack was saying, that's where all the innovation is taking place right now. On the front lines, in the trenches of staffing.
It's so interesting because, the Congress was working on getting that $15, minimum wage, and it, it's now turning out where the companies themselves, because of market forces, are saying, okay, we're going to raise it because we're not getting the people. And Mark, to your point, yeah, there's a combination of either raising it, whatever, the starting salary is, or getting a sign-on bonus, or giving some sort of other incentives, flexible work hours to make it work. So it's interesting to watch that just start to shift, where these companies, whether it's Chipotle or Starbucks or one of these, saying, okay, Costco, we have to kind of change it because we don't, we're not going to get the people, and that's not good for our business.
Well, the valley of uncertainty includes that everything is we're going to see everything go through smoothly, and it's not going to go quite that way. And it's hard for us to kind of figure out where the rough road is actually going to be. But I think that we may see a slight little shift in the way that we kind of, at least for the rest of this year, to at least to see if people are all going to be buying when they get outside. We don't
All right,
know
so that's a
that.
good question. So what do you think, guys? What's all right? What's good? So do you think we're going to hit like a roaring 20s and things are just going to be like amazing, or there's a backlash, something bad happens again? What's your take?
Oof. Goodness. I think there's so much frustration still, right, over the situation. People are just fed up of this being our normal, right? I think that there's incremental changes. Like they say, New Jersey has, I think, lifted almost all occupancy limits, if memory serves, right?
You know what? It's interesting because they're saying like there's no mask. I don't know. Like in my area, people are wearing masks outside, so they lifted it, but I thought it was already lifted. So yeah, I think Murphy is getting rid of everything.
Yeah. Although I'm sure this is about the shore economy more than anything else. I think I really do.
Right. Because that's a big money generator. Mark, here by the Jersey Shore, they want everybody, going down there, keeping these places open.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think because people are frustrated in a lot of geographies about the current state, that a meaningful change in the lockdown status is going to be accompanied by a very significant increases in alcohol consumption and purchase.
That's safe to say.
That's fair. That's fair.
Are you talking about specifically for Mark, or are you talking about just?
But I think we're going to see a
Bailey's on the rocks, baby.
I know where you went before. I see what's going on there.
Yeah, right.
We're getting to start on this whole roaring 20s thing. I get it.
Yeah. Well, I think, but the point being is that there's certain behavior that's going to be expected. What it will transfer to, there's so much that we could speculate that could actually go to the left or to the right. There is no center, but I think for some industries that you've got, whatever you're going to do, you've got to be able to pivot fast. And the one who pivots the fastest is going to win the first lottery, if you will, of profit and being able to thrive.
I would agree with that. My belief. Oh, sorry.
No.
I was just gonna say, listen. I think what it really is going to come down to is because, whoever's going to reap that benefit fiscally is going to be someone whose approach is already in place and is successful because the specific circumstances of how things change is going to situate that specific approach to perform very well. That's what I think it's going to come down to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like what Dixie Banner. Thank you very much for joining us, Dixie. She
Yeah,
says this is a great discussion. The pandemic changed our world and workforce. Remote opportunities will offer dynamic venue and support an excellent work-life balance. And it's very interesting that people are working remote. That means they're also working remote largely away from a lot of their social activities after work, what they're used to doing. So there might be it might be great for the local guy finally that has had the bar, the restaurant, and that
Yeah,
they'll be looking somewhere to
oh yeah,
spend
yeah,
the money.
absolutely.
And especially since they don't have to use that money for travel if they're working remote. And it
Yeah,
looks like Microsoft and some of the other companies are beginning to say, okay, this is our plan. And I think that's what brings a little bit more comfort and brings a little bit more attraction to the employee, to a job seeker, to say, hey, they've got a plan. I feel safe with that plan. Therefore, I can go forward because the smarter employee, the smarter job seeker is looking at the behavior of the company or the companies that go nationwide. The ones that don't reveal it are going to feel a little bit suspect because they're not sure if you're providing a safe environment. You're not sure if you're providing uh, opportunities for me to work remote or a chance to thrive in that new environment.
sure.
Absolutely, Mark. I agree with you. I think it's going to play out where these companies, the ones who are looking ahead, are going to be the winners, and they're going to get the best talent, and they're going to keep the best talent because the Googles, the Microsofts. I was just reading. Google is building this huge campus in San Jose,
Mhm.
California, and they make it awesome. It's beautiful. I mean, it's just amazing. You want to be in these places. They're fantastic. And then they say also, hey, but don't worry, you could work 2 or 3 days from home, or a certain amount you could work remotely. So that this is going to be like the next battle companies are fighting. How can you offer really cool stuff for your employees so that you keep them and you can kind of attract them? Because why would you go to a company if you have a company, let's say like in banking, a lot of these banks, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are saying, we want you back in the office. You have to be back in the office.
Right.
Now there's so many other options. You could go to a fintech company. You can take your skills and go to a cool tech company, t-shirt and jeans, and work from home, work from
Yep.
remote, get kombucha on tap, play ping pong. It's like you have. So if you're not going to be smart about it, you're going to lose the best people. So this
Right.
is going to be, I think, a big trend we're going to see. It's going to be a big trend that we're going to see. All right, you're going to get a cat, and I'm sorry. From the screen.
Ah, oh, there he is. Is that Jingles?
Yes.
Is that Jingles? Yeah, yeah. He's our guy here, the mascot
I'm
of
mascot.
Job. Yeah, the mascot of Job Seeker Nation.
Yeah.
Uh, so, really, I think where we're going with this ultimately is and quite the second half is for you guys is, and I think we kind of hit on some of that, but for you guys as recruiters, what are going to be some deal breakers for you as job seekers are going to be more competitive now, and perhaps they're going to be pulling out all the stops for a lot of these positions, especially if the ones that they've been eyeing for a while and been waiting for a while to really go after. And it could just speak to who you serve, but ultimately, what would be the deal breaker for you? Ed, start with you.
Sure. So I work for internally as a recruiter for a firm in the financial services space. So the regulatory environment in which we function necessitates certain things, right? If we're going to hire someone, that person needs to be able to uh, take a drug test and have their fingerprints taken. That's part of working in financial services. If you're in the space, if you're in the industry, you know this, you accept it. It's just the way it is. Certain things, therefore, are absolutely off the table because that's just part and parcel of the way the organization and the industry function. Um, I think that at least, I think that obviously every organization is going to have their own response, how they want to, where are they willing to make make changes, right? For example, there's one or two roles for which I am currently actively recruiting, which are remote, and they're okay to be 100% remote indefinitely, not just because of the pandemic. You know,
Mhm.
um, there are some roles where I know that's never going to fly. Unfortunately, and that's the reality. That's where the firm has come down. So I said, okay, this is what I need to be looking at. This is the way I'm going to have to approach it with people, and I need to be very clear. I need to be very clear when I talk with job seekers. Hey, listen, just FYI, this is the way it's going to have to be. And
Mhm.
to me, as long as I am transparent and upfront about these things, that especially if I know that they're top of mind for a lot of folks, I mean, I think remote jobs has been the most popular search term in most portals for a little while now, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I need to make sure that people understand that if that's not one of the roles in question, that they understand right up front. Because why would I want to waste that person's time, right? If that's a
Right.
non-negotiable for that person, they need to know that up front. Because look, the fact of the matter is, job seekers' time is also precious and doesn't get respected
Mhm.
nearly enough. We both know that. Everyone listening to this
Mhm.
broadcast knows that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think that people are they have hopes, and then this research
Yep.
and being able to dig into finding out what the position actually really is and it really entails, and they could look deeper and wider, more than just the job description they see on a job board or whatever. And it's a shame too that a lot of people are still they rather seek out a job board than a person to get referred by. But that's a whole nother
Hmm.
discussion. We spent
Oh yeah.
time on the show digging that out, and we've talked about that over the years, Ed, about how people
Sure.
are, habitually always not knowing enough. They wait till they get right up to the branch that's bent back to get hit by the branch, uh,
Right.
instead of anticipating what could possibly be.
Sure.
But I think the deal breaker very often is happens way before you get to it. Is that somebody doesn't try to understand the dynamics of the position, not
Yeah.
just the job position itself, and that tends to kill everything. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I just realized, we've been talking for a couple of minutes, but we haven't. But I haven't actually addressed this specific topic, right? So
Well,
yeah.
I was trying to lead you along the way.
Well, I appreciate the slow walk, but let's jump right there, shall we?
Yeah, right.
Um,
So the deal breaker for you.
yeah. So deal breakers for me, if you and I have a scheduled conversation, right? And you've seen my email address or my in-mail or my email signature, right? You know how to get hold of me. You know who I work for. You have ample
Mhm,
opportunity because I will have scheduled this conversation very likely between 12 to 18 hours before we actually have the conversation.
mhm,
If you are asking me questions that can be answered by a casual three second visit to my website, I
mhm,
am done with you. I'm sorry. I really am. Because you know what? The other people I'm going to talk with, they've already done the research. The competition is stiff. It's always been stiff. It's not as bad as it was 6 months ago, but it's still there's still a lot of competition out there right now. And the next person will have done that homework.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you're absolutely that one was just a tick away for understanding. But I think that people behave in such a way that they want something fast and easy to apply to, more than they do in taking the challenge of how much intel can I dig out before I have this main conversation so I can be impressive. Jack, I'm sure you've experienced the same, where people have come to you and could have found out a lot about you and about your MO as a recruiter before they even have gotten to you.
Of
So they're
course,
not
yeah.
asking all the questions. So what would be your kind of deal breaker?
A couple things. First, I'm sorry. It's so funny. This is work from home where doorbell rings. All right. I figured, all right, whatever. Maybe I'll get it. My wife's not around. So, all right, let me check. And it's the lawnmower guys. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, you can come in. Then I realized, oh, my God, Dolly, another cat. Where's Dolly? So I called up to Jake, my son, like, oh, that's where, like, wait, where's Dolly? Because you can picture the lawnmower going and Dolly, the cat, is, where are they? Fortunately, Dolly was just in a chair somewhere, just chilling out. But
well, there's the famous Super Bowl commercial from many years ago where somebody was vacuuming, and all they show is the vacuuming and the cat, and then they blacked out just in time. You hear this noise.
Oh no, dude!
So I just kind of picture that.
I swear to God, as I'm running up the stairs, hey Jake,
it's nice, right? It may not be as nice as it happened with the lawnmower, but
oh my God,
it's your deal breaker, Jack.
so two things, right? I'll give you I'll give you a real life thing that just happened to me. So I had this client that I'm dealing with on the company side. And there must have been, no exaggeration, like 3 different intake calls to go over what they need. And just like those, you know how like too long to read, instead of a meeting, it should have been an email. Instead of an email, it should be a text and so on. So like this, they got, no exaggeration, 2 hours worth of these time that could easily been a 10-minute conversation. And then I won't go into, but there's a misalignment of they have, they're looking for a Lamborghini, but they only have the money for a scooter. If you have to pay for a scooter, Ed, this is like you're not going to get the Lamborghini. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you got to understand, hey, if you there's nothing wrong with a scooter, that's fine. But you got to understand it. And then it just came to a point where it's like, I just tell them, I just can't work with you guys because the market has changed. We're not like in April of 2020 where, people hat in hand, oh my God, please give me a job. I'm out of work. I'm scared. No, it's changed. So like, you can't, you're just not getting the market. You don't want to get the market or you don't want to do anything. Yeah. And you realize you're just going to sink more time into it. And yeah, so sometimes you just got to walk away and say, this is just not going to work. It doesn't make sense. These people don't understand how, what the market's like, how much they should pay. And then I'm thinking too, it's my reputation as well, because then they're going to think, Jack, what's up? Why are you sending me, to this company? And then they're going to give me a lowball offer, or they don't get back to me, or they're not realistic. Then I look like the bad guy because if I know, and I'm trying to push them into a job that is paying less than they should earn. So it's, for me, I've been doing this so long, it's not worth it to take that risk. Because picture you guys to this place, right? And you feel I should be making, $400,000 or so, and it's only paying like $200,000. That's a lot of money, sure. But if you should be earning 400-ish, well, that's where you're at.
Right.
Why take much less? So that's kind of a deal with where, and I see this going to happen more and more because as we talked about that earlier, is that things have changed. We went from, wow, this is terrible. Everyone was frightened, worried, scared out of their minds to, we have, I don't know, how many millions of Americans have been vaccinated? It's amazing. It's like fantastic. Yeah. I think we went from being the worst in terms of handling it to like one of the best, so that we had millions of Americans get vaccinated. And to me, once that happened, I don't know, I just felt like the mood of the whole country started shifting and becoming much more positive and much more optimistic. And then all of a sudden, states like New York, that was like the epicenter, everything bad, opened up. California opened up.
Right.
No, it wasn't just Texas and Florida, it's all these other places. So that things have improved. Things are getting better. So companies have to recognize, hey, it's better. So we're going to have to do what we have to do to attract that talent, and they're going to have to do the best. And that's kind of, it's hard to say a deal breaker, but that's going to be problematic where companies are putting on the brakes and not doing it, because then the ones who do it, who do spend the money wisely, are going to get the best talent and the best people. And to be fair, the same thing is going to happen with job seekers. You're going to have job seekers that are going to say, the job market's hot. I'm going to ask for a crazy amount of money and let's see if I get it. and I'll just interview, and I'm sure, Ed, you get this. You all do, where they're throwing big numbers around and maybe see if, let's see if they bite. If they bite, great. If not, okay, I'll go somewhere else. So on both sides of the equation, to be fair, that could be a big deal breaker on both sides. And I think that's going to be exacerbated as job seekers are saying, hey, the power is switching to me. I got the cards. I'm gonna push for everything I can get. And the companies are still going to be reluctant. So you can just see a little, that's going to be like until that gets smoothed out, that could last a while.
Love the
that could be a big challenge.
Love the comment by Dixie, and she brings up a very juicy point here. The reintroduction of family values will also modify and change the market outlook, how we operate as a country. So people, and plus, as it relates to what you're saying, Jack, and also you, Ed, that the salary differential all around the country will be a big surprise to folks. And we've talked about this before, Jack, probably numerous times, but we can't say it enough because people just will not listen. Is the way the salary is going to be positioned for those who live in San Francisco and those who live in Iowa or Idaho is going to stand out as being vastly different. And so when somebody is researching and looking at market value, they're not thinking, okay, I can ask for it because of this, because I'm in a small market. I'm looking because the salary that's being promoted, which I think companies would do this. They'll promote the bigger one first and then tell you, oh, yeah, well, you live in Idaho, dude, so you can't have this salary. You can have this salary instead, so that it manages the expectations of the person that's seeking out the job. And that's my view. What do you think, Jack?
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right on target. I think this is going to be this is, in a way, I'm really excited about what's going to happen, despite what I mentioned earlier about just the two sides pitch, digging in. But I'm really optimistic about it because I think it's going to be so cool. So you're going to have smart companies that are going to say, okay, Mark, you don't want to live in you don't live in Silicon Valley, and you don't live in Silicon Valley, but you know what? You're in New Jersey. You're in a suburb of Chicago. We're going to pay you Silicon Valley wages. And you're like, oh, that's fantastic. I don't have to leave my family. I don't have to move. I can stay here. That's great. And I'm going to really be happy and appreciative to this company because they're letting me work remote. And I'm getting a nice big fat salary. And I don't have to live in New York City or Los Angeles or, there. So that's going to be fantastic for so many people. If you live in a small market and you didn't have access to these jobs, now you have access to all these cool companies and all these cool jobs. And that's people think, how awesome is that? If you're in a small town somewhere in the Midwest and you can't even fathom that I could work at a great company and now they have the chance, oh my God, how fantastic is that? You made such a difference in that person's life and their family's life. It's amazing. So I think where companies are going to be understanding and saying, you know what, Ed, from home 4 days a week, God bless, let him do it. We trust him, he's going to do it. And then you're going to be more loyal and you're going to work harder because you can appreciate that they showed you the love and the respect and they honored your request of what to do. And that's how I think this is all going to play out, which could be really good for people because they really have a balance of work and life and it cut down the stress and cut down on all the mental health issues that we have in this country. So I'm thinking all these things could really bode well for us. I mean, we could end up out of this such a better place, such a more, not as anxiety ridden, not as stressful, just cutting out the, you're in New Jersey, cutting out, if you had to go to Manhattan back and forth every day, you know how terrible it is. It just wears you out. So right. I think this is going to be really good. I think we could end up in better space.
Ed, you agree with that, or did you want to add some more thoughts?
I have a different view of this.
Okay, all right.
So here's how I expect this to play out. Look, every state in the union has different laws, different work protections, right? Different payroll protections to make sure that people are being treated fairly. Those protections all need to be taxed in different ways. my belief is that we're going to see organizations that have not operated in certain states begin to say, okay, well, you know what? If we can, since you reside in this state and we're going to need to pay those taxes, we might need to do the whole 9 yards of what that means to have an employee based in that state. And therefore, we're going to pay market rate and adjust the compensation according to the geography of where the employee is going to be located. That is actually kind of my belief on how a lot of organizations are going to seek to do this, because they're going to want to maximize the ROI of their payroll dollar by so doing.
Wait, I'm sorry. So you're saying that, so let's say, I'm working, in somewhere, I don't know, in North Dakota.
Right.
But the company is based in New York City, and New York City will tax me. Their rate is not North Dakota. So, because they want to get, their tax revenue. Is that,
right.
I can see that. I think they were trying to do that already with New York, weren't they? In even California, didn't California have some proposal that if you leave, they can even claw back certain taxes? Like, I'm not stating it anywhere correctly or intelligently, but it seems like these states are trying to, New York and,
right.
and California were trying to do things exactly what you're mentioning, to find a way.
Well,
because they realize you're going to arbitrage. You're going to leave. They're not. They realize you leave. The tax base is leaving. So we got to find a way. I agree with you. I think that's going to happen. They're going to find a way to get their hands in your pocket. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Look, Jack. We live in Jersey, so you know what the city does to people who live in Jersey, right?
Oh my God, yes. Plus property taxes, Ed.
Exactly.
Good thing you guys are not in New York City. Otherwise, you'd probably want to move anyway.
Don't
because of the taxes.
If you're commuting, you get double taxes, and then now you used to have a deduct. I could get this is grumpy old men talk. You used to have the SALT deduction when you could write off, your state, right, your state taxes against the federal taxes, but then they did away with it. So yeah, we just get crushed in New Jersey. Crushed. I think I read somewhere that we're the tax state, really.
Really, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But Chicago, we get crushed in taxes anyway, especially if you live in Chicago proper, where it's 10% tax. It's almost like San Francisco. In a sense, San Francisco is almost near 11, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But anyway, this has been great, guys. Too bad we can't dig into the other things that we have in store here for the people. We'll have to continue it some other time. Ed, we're going to have you back on the show. Great amount of information. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks,
and if you want to catch Ed, you've got to catch him on LinkedIn. It's probably the best, although he's on Twitter. The Twitters, and you can probably catch him there as well. Always giving out great advice. You hear from Ed at least once a day, at least Monday through Friday, by seeing his LinkedIn tips. And of course, are you writing anywhere else, Ed?
No, not right now, Mark. Not right now.
Okay. So, but you can find all of his past stuff online. You can check out job-hunt.org. You can also check about.com, where is plenty of stuff. And again, you can always just check his Twitter feed. Tons of great content. Of course, you catch Mr. Kelly. He writes like seven times every week practically. I think there was one day he had 3 articles in a day on Forbes, so I don't understand that, but he's got a team and they like him at Forbes. And me, you can just watch my stream here on LinkedIn. In the meantime, thank you very much. We are also streaming here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, so if you get tired of going on LinkedIn, you can catch us on the other 2. And also, just to announce the other guests that we got coming up, Kristen Greggs is coming up next week. She's the Trap Recruiter. She's also a recruiter. She'll be able to give us a job search perspective. Lisa Rangel is a good friend of myself and Jack and Ed's. Lisa Lewis Miller is coming up on the 16th, and Brad Minton and Cassie Spencer. They are the crew from Your Career GPS. So we've got a month full of guests and looking forward to having them. In the meantime, thank you very much. And hopefully you'll have a great week. And look for us on Friday. Myself and Damian Burkle, we're going to have Kenneth L. Johnson, who's also a recruiter from you guys' end of the country, New York, between New York and Philadelphia. There you go.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot.